Faith, Love, and Therapy, a podcast to encourage and inspire. I'm your host, Jamie Johnson, a clinical social worker, working in the field of mental health for the last 10 years. Thank you for joining me as we peel back the layers of mental health from a faith perspective. If you'd like to reach out to me, if you want to connect, you can send me an email at faithlovetherapy@gmail.com. On Instagram, I can be found at Faith, Love, and Therapy Podcast, and then on YouTube, Faith, Love, and Therapy. So you can check me out on all platforms, and I hope to connect with you soon. Send me an email, send me a question on any of those platforms. So today, episode 20, I think 20 is a good milestone, and so I'm excited about 20 episodes down, and I wanted to make this one a little bit special and talk about my own journey. And so today it's about my healing journey as a therapist, and just kind of how I got to this space. So I'll take it from why I end up going to therapy. And this is before my career really took off or started in this particular area. And it was that probably around 2012, I was feeling extremely stuck. I was feeling stuck about my profession. I was feeling stuck about relationships. I was just feeling stuck in my life. And I just kept having this, it just felt very cyclical. Like I wasn't making any forward movement. I wasn't going backwards, but it just was not, I was not pleased. And in my family, we are not necessarily the therapy going people. In Black families, we're not typically the therapy. It's changing, which is great. But for the most part, historically, we've struggled to just set aside that kind of upbringing and pride and go to therapy. And so in 2012, I went not telling my family I was going, but I searched online, made an appointment with someone that I felt like really meshed, because I did look for a Christian-based therapist. I wanted somebody that could give me the therapy piece, but also understand where I was coming from spiritually. So I found one, and I've been with her on and off since 2012. She's an amazing therapist. And I'll shout her out, Renewed Perspective, only because she's not taking any new clients. Y'all can't take my spot. But she is an amazing therapist, and I started with her in 2012. But I went in with the question of like, I don't know, or not the question, but the statement of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And we really started to talk about some things, and I focused first on my career. And at that time, I had graduated from college. I graduated from grad school, and I wasn't necessarily fulfilled in the position I was currently employed. And I felt like there was more, but I was afraid of what that was. And I had done all my hours. For those of you that are in the social work field, if you're going to get your license, you have hours to complete. I had done all my hours, and then I was like, I don't really want a license though, because I don't think I'm very clinical. And so I couldn't really move beyond that space. And so just being able to talk with her really started to unpack some things for me. And we really started to identify why I was stuck and what that fear was, specifically first with my career, but unpacking that helped me to see just general fear in my life, period. And so she began to talk to me about the things that just kind of weighed on me. And a lot of it was tied to the fact that I was never addressing fear. I never really felt like I had a great voice in the sense of advocating or knowing what I wanted. Like I was a very quiet, kind of shy person. And so I didn't feel like I fit in the places that I saw or with my colleagues or things like that. And so that turned into me making a lot of excuses as to why I didn't need to get a license. And, people would make the simplest comments of like, well, it doesn't really matter if you get it, just get it and you could use it. But I had a whole lot of like reasons why I shouldn't that didn't really make sense. But she gave me space to like really verbalize that fear. And she heard me, and then the things that I was not saying, she was able to kind of tease out. And I think that was the beauty of the therapeutic relationship. And one of the first like really powerful things I remember her saying is this visual. And she said, I want you to visualize what you're doing with your life. You're literally standing And imagine a crowd of people in front of you, and imagine God standing behind them. And he's saying all he wants you to do is focus on him. And you're focusing on everything that these people are saying you should be and you should do. And I sat there, and I had been in therapy for a few months by then, and I had not, I was not shedding tears. I was like, I'm strong. I'm just trying to work through some things. I don't need to cry in here. But that was that was a breaking point for me, because it was so true. It was absolutely true. Of like, I was wondering like how people would view me, or like what they think I should be. And that was something that I wasn't necessarily taught, but I caught it. I picked it up because it was something that was reinforced during my childhood, not necessarily by my parents, but just by the environments that I was in. And so I had that visual, and I left therapy that day of like, that is not my desire. Like, my desire is not to ignore the Father who's gently trying to get my attention, and I am ignoring him because I'm so focused on the voices of other people. And so I left that session and really sat with it. And she was like, just journal, get some things out. And I did. And in that process of journaling, it was, very clear that there wasn't a reason for me to move forward in my career that made sense. It was really just, I was waiting for validation that was not going to come. It was validation that was not going to come in the manner that I thought it should come. And I end up, sitting and taking my exam. And the funny part of that is that because I was kind of sitting back and taking this passive approach out of fear, I did not study for this particular test. And so I said, well, it's too late now. I'm going to go ahead and take the test, and I know I'll have to retake it. But I was in that place of like truly ready to commit. And so, I say favor isn't fair. I went in and took the exam, and I passed, and I did not study for the exam. And so it to me was another confirmation of God saying, just trust me with your life. And if you trust me with your life, I'll do the things that you haven't even thought of. And it was a moment for me of like another confirmation. And I left that, the testing site, and I text my family. I was like, I passed. And I don't know how I passed because I did not prepare for this test. And so in that space of like my therapist's office, I was able to like really uncover that people-pleasing mentality that I had that was giving me it really gave me a sense of identity, because I was hiding behind the identity of being a really good person or a nice person or somebody that could always be there for people. And while those things are good, they're good when there's balance, and when you're not sacrificing yourself to a level that God has never called you to sacrifice yourself. So she uncovered this people-pleasing mentality that I had, but then she had to go deeper and like, why do you have this people-pleasing mentality? And I think that's also the fear of why we don't go to therapy, because we know if it's a good therapist, they're going to go a little deep. They're gonna call you to the carpet. They're going to pull on some things that you tried to bury, and things that are still growing weeds, even though we're trying to ignore that they're not affecting, or pretend that they're not affecting us, but they are. And so she began to really deep dive into why I was people pleasing. And there was such a deep rooted sense of being less than or not being enough. And so with that deep root, I started to shift and just, if I take the focus off me and what I need and what I want and what I feel, and I focus on other people and I do the things for other people, that then becomes my identity. And I don't have to sit with my insecurities. I don't have to sit with, my fear, because if my mind is completely on, in ways, pleasing other people, making other people happy, I don't have to deal with myself. I don't have to, really go after the things that God has for me, because I can really pretend that all he wants from me is for me to love people and do the things, that make them happy. So that kind of maladaptive thinking kept me stuck. And one of the things that, as a therapist, I try to help people see is that your mindset is literally the key to your bondage. If your perspective, your mindset is tied to something that is unhealthy, if it is rooted in a fear, if it is connected to a trauma, your mindset is not healthy. And so, and it's not necessarily your fault. It's not a sense of blame, but it's understanding that if you are stuck, if you are feeling uncertain, even to a certain degree for some, if you're feeling depressed or anxious, your mindset is a key to a lot of what's happening in you. And I had to see what mindset I was operating out of and had been operating out of for so many years. And in therapy, it was just, she used, scripture, and she also just talked to me practically, and she asked the right questions, which I think, the ability to ask the right questions will unearth the most important things in our lives. And so she asked the right questions to help me see that level of bondage. And I was so bound. And so I was going through this process. She's working with me 2012, 2013, 2014. I'm feeling like, on top of the world. I'm like coming to this great place, this wonderful season. I had started this new job as now a licensed counselor. Excuse me. And so it was a great year. It was a phenomenal year. I wasn't done, but we get to that place where we're excited and it's like that sweet spot. We're like, you know what? I've hit it. I'm done. I'm good. And so I kind of pulled back from therapy because I felt like I had accomplished the goal. And so 2014 hit. I started really dating, met a guy in February of 2014, married him in December of 2014. Probably should have been a little bit longer. But I was in that space. I was in my groove. I was like, I know that, God is opening doors and things are great. But what we don't realize is everything has not been processed. Everything has not been unearthed. And while she had unearthed these things in my career, and while I was making, fear of these choices, we had not really touched on relationships. And so some of the same insecurities showed up in the relationship. But I had not been going back to therapy. And so I'd never say that my marriage was a mistake, but it was an absolute lesson. And it brought me back to that moment in time where she said, you're listening to the voices of the people and you're not listening to the Father. And in that moment, I was so listening to the voices of not many people, but of my voice, what I wanted. And so, I married him, didn't go through all the things that I encourage other couples or other singles to go through. And from 2014, and we were divorced in 2018, because I had not taken that time, when I tell you my life changed, I was on top of the world and then went to a place of like complete and utter sadness and disappointment. Even the practical things, my credit score went down. My bills were not being paid. It wasn't because I didn't want it to be, but it was because I had connected with somebody that was not for me. But I had not taken that time to really deal with the relational stuff that had been going on or that I had struggled with. And so I went back to therapy. I went back to therapy while I was married, and I'm, having these conversations. And by this time, my new spiritual leaders were in place, and I was having conversations with them. They had actually just arrived shortly after we got married. And so I was developing a relationship with them, and, just in spiritual counsel and things of that nature, and then counsel with my actual therapist, just being able to see what was going on and that there was such a violation that was occurring that God had not ordained for my life. And there's so many people that are stuck, especially for those of us that are in the church, because we hear so much about divorce and about, pushing in relationships. And so we feel somewhat condemned because when things don't work, we think we've done something or we're disappointing God. And what I had to realize and through the counseling was that God is not going to bless something that he knows is not good for you. And so being able to let go of that particular season, that particular mindset, and release it so that God could do what he needed to do in both of us. I don't know where he is, but I wish him the best in his life. And that's, sincere. But my journey was kind of back and forth with this whole therapy and mental health piece, because we always get to a place where we think we have it, and being okay with allowing ourselves to venture back to get that support is important. One of the other things that she helped me unearth in therapy was that I wasn't really living authentically. I was bending to the needs of other people, and I was really denying myself. And so in that, I lost myself for several years. I lost myself, and it was reflected in how I spoke, how I looked. It really reflected that I was lost, and I was in a place that was, very unhealthy. And so she helped me to connect my thoughts and feelings and my behavior and why I was making the choices that I was making, and then how to come up with a plan of what to do next. And part of that was always seeking God and seeking his direction and his timing. And so from the counsel on both sides, we were able to come to a decision and move forward. There's so much in that journey that I'd probably have to tell a different time, but it is filled with confirmation of why you have to know, one, you have to have a relationship with God. Two, you have to know when God is saying yes and when God is saying no. And when you ignore him, you choose to ignore him, there's still grace. Like, he loves us that much that there's still grace. But in that particular season, God was showing me things, whether through dreams or confirmation through other people. He was showing me, this is not what I have for my daughter. And so after the divorce, I'm still in therapy. I am a therapist, but I also talk to my therapist routinely because, one, I hear a lot and I want a place to process my own stuff. But two, because I don't think it is smart to pretend that therapists don't have our own issues. I mean, we got into the field for a reason. And so generally, we all joke about it, but generally the reason was because somebody we know had a mental health issue. We struggled ourselves with a mental health issue, whether it was depression or anxiety or relational issues, or we felt a calling to do that. But there's always a connection to why we felt that calling and how there was a manifestation of it. So, even now in this particular season that I'm in, where there's so much more freedom spiritually and mentally and emotionally, where I feel like God has allowed me to see how much my mindset needed to be adjusted in order to have a greater relationship with him and have a greater relationship with my family, and to change my perspective on everything, on how I engage in the world. So my healing journey, I won't say it started in 2012, but it really hit a pivotal moment in 2012. And that therapy process brought me through several moments of wanting to give up, wanting to, not be a therapist, wanting to, let go of life, period. There's a season where I was like, God, if you just want to take me home, I'm ready to go, wherever you want to do. Very passive, but at the same time, I was just at that place of just being so fatigued. So, my own journey is filled with ups and downs, but the ups have taught me, have prepared me for the downs, and the downs have taught me so much about not only myself, but who God is and who he is for me and in me. So this is just, I guess, a small snippet of my healing journey, but because I still feel like I'm still on it, and I don't think I'm ever going to come off of it, because that's just the nature of the life that we live, is that we go through so many things that we are in a place of, returning to that healing that we need, that processing that we need, that love that we need that comes from the Father. So I hope this particular episode kind of gave you some encouragement and understanding that we all have a journey. And if you kind of let go of your expectations of what things should look like and allow someone to help you through it, it could truly change your life. So I appreciate you listening today. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Faith, Love, and Therapy. I will see you next time.